2017. Can we have a roll call, please?
Good morning, Chair Liu,
Present.
Vice Chair Kim,
Here.
Board Member Guyer, Board Member Balte,
Present.
and we have Board Member Firth absent. Related to that, Board Member Guyer said that he would attend the subcommittee with the Vice Chair Kim to help out in that regard. Thank you.
Now is the time for oral communications. The public may speak to any item that's not on the agenda. I don't have any speaker cards for that. I do have lots of speaker cards for the cell tower item. Are there any agenda changes today?
I just wanted to note that we have now started to include a tentative future agenda in your packet. Unfortunately, the one that got printed in the packet wasn't the final version, so we have placed a final version at places.
Great,
Thank
we
you.
have that. Thank you. Okay, so let's move on to the first item, which is number 2, which is a study session for various sites. Request for preliminary architectural review of location and siting criteria, and design options for the deployment of 16 small cell wireless communication nodes on utility poles and streetlights in the public right-of-way. Nodes are proposed for downtown North, University South, and near Town and Country. The environmental assessment is it's not a project. A formal application will be subject to secret review, and the zoning district varies. We have our project planner, Rebecca Atkinson. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair and board members. The proposed project is as stated. I'd like to clarify that preliminary architectural review applications are not required, but highly recommended for all major architectural review applications. And I'd like to take a moment to just acknowledge that the applicant did submit this application and promotes that kind of early public comment and transparency. While this application does have Verizon as the proposed wireless carrier, this project has a different applicant with a different business model and a different master license agreement, so it's Crown Castle. The proposed design apparently doesn't have the opportunity for an additional carrier at this time, but Crown Castle does typically have the business model of offering co-location opportunities, so that's one difference. The locations of this project are, as you mentioned, downtown North, University South, and adjacent to Town and Country. Again, this is a project that's different than the Vinculum's Verizon small cell project in other neighborhoods. Generally, this project proposes 3 different configurations, and I'll show what those configurations are in just a second. Generally, here's the general distribution of the proposed nodes. The first configuration is for wood utility poles, and generally the antenna would be approximately 48 inches and would have a bayonet that would extend from the top of the wood utility pole unless a wood utility pole was proposed for replacement. The second configuration would have the antenna on top of a street light, and the associated equipment would be in a ground-mounted cabinet, similar to what you've seen in some other Crown projects here downtown. And the third configuration, which is proposed for adjacent to Town and Country, would have 24-inch antennas, and all the equipment would be mounted to the pole. Formal applications need to show compliance with FCC STACY standards, and again, wireless carriers appear to have different designs. Formal applications need to be reviewed for a wide variety of consistency items and code requirements, including the comprehensive plan policies, which are outlined in one of your attachments to the staff report, wireless development standards in our municipal code, and our regular architectural review findings and conditional use permit findings. The purpose of this meeting here today is to receive early feedback from the Architectural Review Board and hear from comments from the members of the public. Crown Castle does have some key questions on the last page of their project description that they'd like to discuss. And it's also, the purpose is also to discuss early city feedback on all of the preliminary design criteria and siting options and so forth. The guidance that staff provided is summarized at a high level on pages 9 through 10 of the staff report. And of particular note, this application debuts a new typology for the city. It proposes a new pole in the right-of-way as opposed to utilization of an existing structure. This node also has sensitivity as written up in the staff report on page 10 under the historic comments. It's my understanding that the applicant may also be interested in debuting an alternative location to one known shown in the project plans that you received last week. Staff has not yet seen these plans, but they should be at places here. Public comments were posted online, and so they're cited as attachment E in the staff report. And staff has subsequently received 2 public comments, and exhibits are here at places. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Great, thank you, Rebecca. And also just to I just want to mention that because it's a study session, that no action is being taken by the board today. And so we'll hear from the applicant. You have 10 minutes, and then we'll hear from the public speakers. And I have I think I have 3 speaker cards, so each person will have 5 minutes to speak. And then we'll bring it back to the board for comments. And welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. I genuinely appreciate the opportunity to be able to get feedback from you this morning. I'm Rochelle Swanson, and I'm with SureSite. And I've been, our company's been hired by Crown to do the government relations and to work with the community, to work with staff, and to work with the city in general to be able to do the siting and to be able to do the rollout. I also have with me other folks from Crown Castle. I have Ernesto Figueroa, who's our RF engineer, and I have Greg Day from Coastal Communications, who'll be able to answer questions about drawings, anything specific, and then John Griffiths, who is our construction manager, and Sharon James, our government relations, is on her way here. She's in traffic. I just want to do a little background, and Rebecca touched on it, that Crown Castle is a CLEC, or also known as a competitive local exchange character, which allows us to be in the right-of-way and to be able to do deployment in small cells and be able to erect poles, add attachments. And to go further than that, this is not the first piece of this project. That was approved before, and with 19 nodes, and this is an additional 16 to be able to lay out that RF design to be able to have a consistent network throughout Palo Alto is, what the goal is, to be able to provide ubiquitous coverage and to be able to have a backbone that makes it predictable. As Rebecca also mentioned, Crown is not a carrier. We would be the landlord to the tenant, Verizon. We actually build the system and have the backbone and then rent out space. And as Rebecca mentioned, not just to Verizon, this is particular to them. They've asked to be tenants on this and to build out the system, but it is not exclusive to Verizon. It is true that it's possible for co-location on these sites. Going forward, that's not something that would be automatic. That is something that would come back to the city in an application. And just to touch a little bit, there's sometimes confusion between coverage and capacity. So coverage is just a blanket coverage that where sites are built out to be able to meet up and to provide that coverage. And going back when wireless started, that was good. We could get coverage, we could have macros. As more and more people have cell phones and do data, capacities become a real issue. And that's why you're seeing more small cells. They need to be closer and smaller to actually be able to hold that traffic, especially as we have far more data now than voice. Whether it's text messaging or screening movies, it depends on who's using the technology. I won't read it to you, but so just a few quick graphics. So the one in the corner up there is 47%. It just shows what the growth and change is as we're going through and picking up through 2019. They expect it to get quite a bit quicker. Now this graphic on the bottom at 48% was from 2015 to show how quickly things are changing. Now that's at 50%. Through a study that just came out in the CDC that I have on the next page, and it's from 2017. So that's a 2% nationwide growth. So it is possible it's going to go even faster. As you can see, for communications accessibility, 53% people indicate from the one study that they were glad that their phone was available. And of course, there's public safety requirements and accommodations that have been helped, and we do try to work closely with possible the public safety, and that's industry. That I can't just say that's just for Crown. So stating before, over 50% of homes are there, and they're anticipating that continue to growing, especially as wireless is really becoming the utility backbone for most of the communications. So the feedback that I wanted to ask you in the back, I wanted to be able to just get into specifics rather than give you an overview. I know small cells, this isn't the first time that you're seeing this. So on node 26, we'd originally placed it in front of the building there near Gilman, and during the design review and development review committee, we got feedback from the historic that the viewpoint there coming into the landscaping, they felt that that was going to be an impact, and that locating at that site is something that was not going to work within those guidelines. So there was a concern on the impact. So sometimes we can look and try to move nodes. I mean, our design is pretty tight, but on this one, the RF engineer went out along with our A&E and looked at the different areas again to see if we could do something different. So one thing I want to note, so these were first walked in November of last year after they had already been designed by RF doing a desktop, and we did go pole to pole and be very cognizant in the area we were being at. How can we accommodate the needs of this design and deployment, but also be very sensitive to the environment that we're being in. So they went and looked at the different corners, the different pole and what was available to keep it viable within the network. This is where the location that was decided. Now, this is not an existing streetlight, so it would be an addition of a streetlight, or it could be an addition of just a single slimline pole only. That is completely, that's one of the things I'm here to ask is with this solution, what would you prefer? What would make more sense for this neighborhood in this part of Palo Alto? And looking for that same feedback as well to the ground furniture. The mailbox is shown just because that's already was in the first 19 and throughout downtown for consistency. But each area, each neighborhood is unique, and I think it's important. We want to be able to recognize that and get that specific feedback. Another poll that didn't make it into the packet because we wanted to consider alternatives, but it wasn't part of the formal resubmission because the drawings weren't ready yet, is node 22. And as you can see here, here's where it's proposed currently, right there by 386 Everett. And like I said, typically it's tight to move them on these corners in particular. That's a way to be able to get signal going both up and down both streets and to get the surrounding area, and it provides us an ability to do less nodes. That's why the corners often are there. And I know that those are disfavored from your last ARB hearing, but that's why we kept them in to have an opportunity to explain that that's how we keep the number of nodes small. So this would be the alternative, which is across the street. Yeah, very similar. It's still the pole top extension that you see there, which was, staff was wonderful. They came out in March and they walked all the sites with us and said, we really would prefer, rather than having standout arms in what's known as GO 95 and COM space, General Order 95 from the PUC, would to please do pole top extensions. I think was great direction because it just shows a consistent plan throughout the neighborhood where it's at and a consistent visual look. And those will be painted brown. We can't go all the way to touch the pole just because of requirements from the PUC and just from the utility needing to be able to see those connections. And if you have a question more about that, you can ask construction. Here are some street furniture options that I wanted to share with you. Again, looking for your direction. I could certainly suggest what I would want in my community, but this is your community, and I think each neighborhood can have something specific. The first one is an art wrap, and I apologize, they did such a good job on that one. Blending it in is kind of hard to see, but that is in fact an art wrapped utility box. Those I was kind of thinking about, down like on Ramona and Hover and in those neighborhoods there that maybe that's something that would make sense, and on Waverly. The middle one is a trash can, and I know before, when it was raised in May, that there was concerns that maybe there would be confusion or they wouldn't be well utilized. There's actually new and better technologies and options coming out all the time. On this one, that is a real working trash can or recycle receptacle, and the antennas are next to it. And there's any number of options. It can have any kind of art wrap, pictures. It can be plain, like an extra utility box, and that can be placed near the pole. And so for those ones, I know there's concerns about the pedestrian walkthrough, and especially more in the commercial area district, that I thought this could be a good alternative. Maybe take out some of the trash cans. So we're not adding, we're actually just replacing or providing better receptacles for trash and recycling. And then, of course, the last one is the mailbox, which we've already used on our last build out, and I think for some locations is appropriate because it just shows a continuing look of the pole next to the mailbox. The other option that I wanted to request on feedback is Town and Country there on Embarcadero and on El Camino Real, and really looking at, there are many options that can be done. Those were suggested by staff to put them on the pole because there's not a lot of ground space there, so perhaps adding a banner or something similar would be a nice way to have it blend in, especially with Town and Country being right there. That's a very critical area, just because you can imagine between the traffic, the pedestrian, as well as the shopping center, there's a high demand there. I went through the community comments. There were 13 correspondents. The RF concerns, already did the reports, and those range between 1 and 11% of the public safety standard. And for noise, there will be no noise. These are passive cooling. And for the siting, as I said, we went out in November, we went out in March with staff, and then we've also went out and re-examined different sites when concerns have been raised. I wanted to give a quick example. Sorry, guess I'm done. I'm going to wrap up. That this just shows one node of where it is approached on that particular spot in the community, and how the RF opens to see with the weakened power of a small cell, it's really contained clear to the pole. And then, so I just request general feedback from you of how is the best way to really have this fit in with your community, and go through the specifics, answer questions, and really look to you for guidance. So thank you again for your time and leaving me the few minutes to wrap up.
Great, thank you for your presentation. So let's move on to the speakers, public speakers. I have Steve Lyken, and then followed by Elena Campagna and Mike Middle. And
Hi.
each of you will have 5 minutes.
Okay. Well, thank you for having us. My name is Steve Lick, and I'm actually at the Node 22, the tall building, and we're on the top floor. And our building's 52 feet tall. The pole is 49 feet. So our building, and it's only 25 feet. So from our deck, about 30 feet up, that antenna would be about where that skylight is, 25 feet over and about 19 feet up. A 4-foot antenna. So we asked Rochelle to come out and take a look, and she did take a look, and fortunately, we're appreciative that she came up with an alternative, because nowhere else in Palo Alto of the 56 poles that are wood poles is anyone next to a 3-story building but ours. So we feel that this is obviously not the norm, and this would have a big impact on us. The pole, we have a deck outside the building, so we're actually sitting looking at the pole as we look to the park. Right. The alternative pole is actually on the same line of sight, and probably about 5 feet shorter. So it's actually also right here. While we appreciate having an alternative, we would much prefer one that's not directly in line of sight, almost at the same level as us. Up and down the street, we have poles in both directions. The pole across the street's about 21 steps, and there's another pole, or 17 steps, and there's another pole 42 steps down the street on Waverly as well that we would prefer. That's not next to anything other than 1-story homes. So our concern is that having such a pole so close is not only going to ruin our view, but it's going to have a big impact on our property value. I don't know if we could sell our house with a 4-foot antenna so close. People are just going to have their own concerns, and the view of the park is going to be a big impact on us. And I think there are alternatives. There's many poles in the area. I know that the constraints are tight on, I guess, the goals of Crown and Castle. I'm sure there's trade-offs in terms of meeting their plan 100% to the ideal location and what the alternatives would be, but we do need an alternative to this pole. It's just grossly unfair to have that particular pole be part of this plan. Okay, thanks.
Great, thank you. Okay, Elena Campagna.
Hi, I'm Elena Campagna of Stucker Northway Architects. I'm actually the architect for 362 Channing. There's a remodel going on there, and the owners asked me to speak on their behalf to talk to the aesthetics of this node. Proposed site number 28 is located in front of their property, and we think it's a poor choice for the cell node and respectfully request a nearby alternative pole be considered instead. I put together a quick little visual aid packet to help illustrate my points, which I believe are at places. My client's house was built in 1904. It's the purple one. Well before any zoning ordinance, their tiny lot is only 35 feet wide and 50 feet deep. So their existing two-story house is, their front setback is only a little less than 8 feet to the kitchen bay window and less than 10 feet to the two-story portion of the house. The existing streetlight pole was put there during SOFA 1, and it's already a nuisance and shines light directly into their second floor windows because there's no screening there. Adding the aesthetically unappealing cell node would be 100% visible from their windows, which are only about 15 feet away from this pole. There are 2 underground utility vaults directly next to the pole on the southwest side, which prevent any trees from being planted within about 15 feet of that pole. Crown Castle states in their location and site criteria that they are trying to avoid proposed undergrounding districts. This site is in one. Utilities were undergrounded back in 1993 or 94. They're also trying to avoid sites adjacent to first and second stories windows. Ours are 15 feet away from this. They also said they were trying to avoid sites without screening. There is 0 screening around this particular pole. And because of the utility vaults, you can't add one on the side that would benefit 362 Channing or from the direction of all the traffic that's, goes down Channing. They also said they favor poles with little or no underground utilities, and this one has underground vaults, right next to it. We're suggesting 2 alternate pole locations instead. The intersection at Waverly and Channing has 2 existing poles that are just about 150 feet away from number 28 and still seem to work very well with the spacing on their map. I have a little map where I put some red dots. While Crown Castle stated they wanted to avoid choosing poles in intersections for visibility reasons, one of the alternate poles is next to a parking lot, not an occupied house, and is already surrounded by very tall trees, taller than the pole that's there, and would provide screening, in its existing condition. Channing is a very busy street, just as busy as the intersection at Waverly, so choosing site number 28, a highly visible pole that you can't screen because of utility vaults, over an alternate pole at the intersection, which is next to a parking lot with existing tall trees, doesn't make any sense to us. Intersections already have poles, signs, utility boxes. It makes more sense to add cell nodes there than directly in front of people's houses. We would like Crown Castle to please relocate cell node number 28 to a pole at the intersection of Channing and Waverly. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And the last speaker is Mike Middle.
Good morning, members of the ARB. My name is Michael Medolo. Our home is located at 362 Channing Avenue. I've been a Palo Alto resident for over 22 years. We are completing the remodel of our home. It has taken 2 years to remodel and has been in planning since late 2013. We are on a substandard lot, 35 by 50. Our setback in the front and in the back of our home is only 10 feet from the second story and 8 feet from the first floor kitchen. The distance between the 2 ends of the tables where you are seated today is greater than the distance from the proposed cell site tower, site 28, and our kitchen on the ground floor and our bedroom on the second floor of our home. 10 feet How comfortable would you be having an RF energy source that close to where you eat and sleep? 10 feet. As has already been pointed out, energy from a cellular phone tower antenna radiates outward toward the horizon parallel to the ground, and that amount of energy decreases as the distance from the antenna increases. Thus, the level of exposure readings for RF energy at ground level is going to be very low compared to the level close to the antenna. In the siting criteria for small nodes, as indicated, you are the applicant is supposed to disfavor the poles that are in a proposed undergrounding district. We are in an underground district, and the utilities in the area were undergrounded in 1993 or 1994. As part of the overhead to underground utility conversion, an underground utility junction box was located in front of our home where none existed. That left us with an underground box next to a light pole, which was relocated from the opposite side of the street and placed in front of our home. Supposed to encourage poles with significant tree screening in order to reduce visibility of the project. That would be an impossibility here. There will never be a tree because it cannot go through a metal underground utility junction box. We experience visual and light intrusion in our home from the light pole already. That light literally shines up into the front of our house. The location is not appropriate because it has inadequate screening. One of the other criteria is to favor poles away from the first and second story windows in order to reduce the visibility of the project. That, again, would not be attainable with this particular location because it is only 10 feet from the bedroom and kitchen windows of our home, 8 feet. There are 2 locations at Waverly and Channing with street lights within 150 feet of our home, which, with light poles and tree canopies that can effectively shield the tower that has been proposed for Site 28. Although the city prefers that cell sites be located, applicant prefers that cell sites not be located at intersections, as indicated in siting criteria numbers 4 and 9, this does not take into account that the underlying reason to minimize aesthetic impact is to minimize aesthetic impact. However, in this case, the aesthetic impact is much worse and much more dramatic at Site 28, where it is left mid-block, as indicated, right between our home, 362 Channing, and the neighboring property at 370 Channing, where we will never have the possibility of the tree canopy. In looking at the planned locations, each of the sites is about a block apart, with the exception of site number 28. I would refer to the packet that was submitted by our architect, Elena Campagna, and also compare it with a package submitted by Crown Castle. So if you look at that, you'll see that the distance required is generally a block. However, the one exception is the one in front of our home. For some reason, they've indicated that at half a block. Our attorney has already contacted the applicant, Crown Castle, but the applicant has shown little interest in looking at the obvious reasons why site number 28 is inappropriate and why this particular site should be either eliminated or positioned at either of the 2 alternate locations, which would be available under 150 feet away near the corner of Channing and Waverly, where adequate tree screening exists, and which is also within the range of service that was indicated by the rest of their service map on this application. I'd like to thank you for your time. I can't emphasize enough how much light intrusion we already have into our home, what a dramatic impact this has. One of the other speakers did also note the effect on values. As you all know, as Palo Alto homeowners, our properties in this area are multi-million-dollar homes, and any kind of remodel, of course, does have a significant impact as well. That means that we have a significant financial investment, as well as, of course, the effect on our daily lives, because none of us wants to leave Palo Alto. This is, I think, a reasonable request to have this pole located in an area that's only 150 feet away, and there is no reason that this node should only be half a block away from all of the other ones when there's a full block range between all the other sites located here. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, I'm bringing it back to the board. Are there any questions? No? Okay. Q, will you start us off on comments?
Yeah, once again, thank you for bringing this forward as a preliminary review. I think I'll pick it up from the end of the applicant's presentation with respect to some of the immediate feedback that they were asking for. You know, the thing about these cell towers is that whenever I'm found with the task of really focusing on the design of these and looking at them specifically, they're not very pretty. And the more I look at them, the more I question, are there any other ways that we can go about designing cell towers that are a little bit more aesthetically pleasing? But at the same time, once some of these previous installations have been made, you hardly notice them. And so I think I'm caught between, what is the best way to go about this? But with respect to, excuse me, some of the equipment at ground level, I think more and more I'm less of a fan of the fake mailboxes. It's something that disguises it to look like something that is almost a skew morph where, we like to think that people still walk in their neighborhoods and drop off their mail, but you can't even drop off your mail because it's not a real mailbox. So I almost prefer, a utility box, and perhaps it has an art wrap, or perhaps it's an opportunity for local artists rather than, just covering up with some kind of vinyl from an unknown artist. And then I think I'm open to the trash can or the trash or recycling bin solution also, where perhaps it's a way that we can encourage people to not litter on the streets, but at the same time, create something that's a little bit more functional than a fake mailbox or just a utility box. For node 26, I prefer, if it has to stay in that location, I would prefer that it become a street light or something that gives back a little bit to the community and add a little bit to safety, rather than create a pole that isn't there even to begin with. For node 22, I do like the newer design and new location that's been proposed at our places this morning. And then at the end of the project description, I know that there were a couple of things that you also asked for feedback. I think I've covered some of them. For the town and country sites, there was little talk in the presentation with regards to that, and I know that there are no public speakers, but because you've asked for specific feedback, I agree that, even though that there's only currently one tenant, that there will be, that we should be open to the notion of co-location, and that the additional boxes will have to be thought about. I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there were box locations proposed, right? So that would be something to look at, and I think something that should be thought through earlier than later. I think overall in the packet, I know that the packet is submitted and the city asked for certain things, but I think overall for us, not all of the pages apply, and there was just a lot of information there, and I don't know if it's an hindrance to ask for perhaps a summarized packet for the ARB members so that we're looking at specifically what we're supposed to look at. But there were a couple, labeling things and just a couple minor things that I noted while looking through the package, and I think for preliminary comments, I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you. Robert?
Yeah, I agree. It's one of these things that everybody likes the idea of having their cell phone work well, but nobody wants one of these poles near them. And you're right. It is, you would think after a while we would be able to make these things a little bit nicer looking, but if I have to have my druthers, I'd prefer to have the ones that you show on the light pole. I mean, I don't want to have one where it's just the pole for the sake of the unit itself. Also, I'm not really a big fan of the, and I don't know how we can change it, but for instance, for Site 20, the ones on the telephone poles, those just seem to be exceptionally large and just really stand up there that I'd like to see something a little bit more thought out rather than, I mean, that thing really just looks like an afterthought that was planted on the top. As far as the, I don't really want to see the equipment hanging from the pole. I just as soon get rid of it. I agree that having a phony mailbox is probably not the way to do it. I mean, we might as well just call it what it is and have it a utility box or obviously, underground it, one or the other. But I'm guessing obviously utility box is a whole lot cheaper. So I'd rather see either a wrap or something with that. If you don't need to make it look like something else, we may be able to get a smaller utility box. I think that's it for now.
Peter.
Okay. I'd like to start by thanking you for a clear application and maybe guideline back to staff. Having good quality photos side by side of before and after with a map on each sheet is really helpful to me and to the public. All applications should be like this. So like my colleagues have said, it's a balancing act here. I've gone back to the codes we have to enforce because I'm trying to understand where the architecture part of this comes in. So I'm going to base my comments on us needing to make architectural findings number 2 and 3, particularly regarding screening antennas. And then I think number 4 applies to the ground equipment. Then I go back to the city code itself on these wireless facilities, they call them. And base stations and antennas need to be concealed. And I'm just going to read it because I want to be very clear that we're coming from the code on this. According to 1842-10, section I-6, it's requiring that these things be concealed. So I want to take my analysis based out of the code, and looking at this, then I say to myself, are these antennas concealed adequately from an architectural point of view? I do not believe that the antennas on top of the utility poles are well concealed. In my opinion, for an antenna on top of a wooden utility pole to be concealed, it would need to have a shroud of the same color, texture, and diameter as the pole for the full height of the antenna and the mounting bracket. Once I apply that standard to it, the antennas proposed on poles 20, 21, 22, 24, 25, and 32 do not meet that standard, and I could not support having them positioned that way. Taking the same logic, I look at the antennas mounted on top of the light poles, for example, number 25, and I find that they are somehow concealed, even though they're not the same size and shape and material perhaps. Something about that design, about the integration with the arm of the light fixture, makes it look okay. It seems to just fit right in. In my opinion, the antennas mounted on top of light poles are well concealed and are therefore appropriate. That said, I caution the applicant that there are 2 different finishes on these poles, a newer brushed metal finish. Your antenna seems to go well with that style. Your photos don't show it quite as well, but walking around, there's a number of older green faceted poles with a little more decoration. Putting a brushed metal antenna on top with the same design as the other one would not be well concealed. Again, coming back to the code, the standard is these need to be well concealed. That would mean the design needs to be integrated to somehow match the design of that pole. What would that lighting pole designer have made if they had to put this element up there? I think that's what my fellow board members are saying, but I'd like to be crystal clear. That's coming out of the requirement in the ordinance. They need to be better concealed. Then I step to the ground equipment, and you're asking us which form of box is appropriate. I do not find any surface-mounted equipment on the ground to be appropriate. I think all of these do not meet finding number 4 in that they're a hindrance to the public, and they're not concealed or appropriate. I think they should all be underground. I say this secondarily because we're required to allow other wireless carriers to co-locate. And yes, they have to go through an approval process, but if you look carefully at the terms of how that process goes, it's a much more expedited process. The shot clock goes very quickly. The city really doesn't have much time, and the only thing we can really do at that point is approve what's already been approved. So I say to my colleagues, what we're doing is setting a precedent here. It seems to me a good precedent for Palo Alto, for us in general, is to say that the equipment should be in a vault underground. That's done with other equipment for utilities, telephones. I've designed many houses in town where my clients are extremely vocal about having all their equipment. For example, cable TV used to have a green metal box about 10 inches in diameter, 3 feet high. There's no technical reason that couldn't be mounted underground. It wasn't done at the time. Many, many times we pushed back with those companies and get it underground. In this case, yes, you'd be investing in the infrastructure to create a vault underground, which could then be used for future co-locations. It would then give you the freedom to put whatever you like in there, how you like to do it. In the long run, it'll be a much better investment as a company investing in this infrastructure. From the point of view of the city, having an additional grouping of metal boxes on the sidewalk, as shown in these photos, is not concealed, and I find inappropriate and will not be able to make findings to approve the boxes unless they're underground. On node number 26, where it's a pole only, I find that obviously not concealed. It's a brand new pole where there was no pole before. That's hardly concealed, and I think it needs to be either a light fixture, which really should be a light fixture that's needed by the city. The city will have to maintain that light, or you just have to find another way to do it. But the idea of putting new poles with antennas around town, we're setting precedent here. Once one of these people does it, the next application that comes in, the city has 60 days to decide on that. It means they're going to be approved every time. We can't establish that precedent of putting a pole with an antenna downtown, even if it looks like a light fixture. Then my last comment is really regarding not architectural, but I can't resist to add this. It seems to me it's good public policy to try to get electric utilities undergrounded. Everybody I've spoken to around the town seems to follow that logic. Somehow putting cell phone antennas on top of utility poles is going to make that really hard to accomplish. Whether or not it's in a future district, it just seems to me that it's not the right way to go about it. So I put it out there. I could not make any architectural findings to support that, but it seems to me from a point of public policy, mounting them on things that we have to have anyway, like streetlights, makes a lot more sense. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Peter. Okay, so thank you for the presentation, and I do think that the packet was organized well in terms of the three groupings of, like light poles, utility poles, and then town and country. I just had one comment on the packet itself, is that some of the simulations, some of the photo simulation photos were taken kind of like at twilight or sunset, and they're really much too dark in it. I think what they do is it de-emphasizes the cabinet-mounted equipment that are only like 8 or 10 feet above the sidewalk. And so I think for those, some of them are fine, but there are some of the photos I think are too dark, and that they should be redone. And but otherwise, I think the packet was well put together. I did walk all of the sites yesterday, or on Tuesday. I generally had a favorable impression of the ones that are mounted on the light poles on the corners, say like on Channing and Homer. I generally had a favorable review of that. It seemed to me, I think my comment was similar to Peter's. Somehow it seemed more integrated. And then in those locations, I think you're proposing vaults for a lot of the equipment. I did have a comment on those. I think that the light poles are, the street lights are at like a 45-degree angle into the intersection. And I think your drawings are all showing them like perpendicular with the intersection. So I would just like you to double check all of that. I had generally, I think I was also in that vicinity. I think I also did have a similar reaction to the owners of 362 Channing and number 28. I actually went to the corner of Channing and Waverly expecting it to be there, and then I was looking through the packet and I realized that I had to backtrack and go to the middle of the block. The owners of 360 Channing are proposing it to be moved to Channing and Waverly, and I do want to caution the applicant that that corner lot with the parking lot and the trees has two approved houses going there, so it's going to change probably within the year. And there again is small setback or small lot, two small lots, single-family houses. So I think we're going to you'll face the same issue there, but there are mature trees there at that site. On the number, which one is it? 26, right? This is the new pole location. I did have a question for you. Is that like that apartment building has a very strong axial relationship and front walkway going out there, and I would just want to make sure that whatever is new there works within that sort of entry piece of there. And in a way, like I think we had discouraged the bench prototypes on one of our other cell phone proposals, but in this case, if there were like a bench on axes with the entrance, it actually could be nice, right? I mean, so I was try to think out of the box sometimes and make it site specific. If the neighboring property owner is amenable to it, it could be better. And I think again that probably the light is better than just a pole only. Okay, and then on the downtown north sites, I did have more concerns about those. I think some of those existing utility poles are really ugly. Some of them are dual poles, which are really even worse than the standard utility pole. There were a couple locations there that didn't seem to have any trees whatsoever, like very exposed corners. And it seems like, yeah, the equipment will be very visible to those. I think also I noticed that some of those areas have very narrow planting strips, so it may not be possible to put vaults in all of those locations. I think there's one on High Street and Hawthorne. It seems like there might be some problems in some of our smaller streets. Also, I think the one on High Street had houses that are very close to the sidewalk, very small setbacks. There were a couple of locations downtown north that did have mature oak trees, and those seemed like good locations for that. I could not quite tell on the pole-mounted equipment. I couldn't quite tell where you were locating them. Sometimes on the drawings you would say you're locating it in the 9 o'clock position, but I wasn't always sure if that was like street facing or building facing. If you can make it, if it's possible to make it more clear. It seemed like there were different things happening on different locations. So I would have to go back. I mean, I think you have the information there, but it was a lot of information for me to process just on one site visit. I think we had, when we did the AT&T DAS thing, I think we had, my recollection is our preference was to put any pole-mounted equipment facing the street, so that if somebody was looking out their window, that they wouldn't see it, right? You'd be more visible from the street, sort of, than from the house side. I think that was our logic at the time. I think also our logic at the time was to try to get them as high up as possible. I know there are restrictions on that. It seems like the pole-mounted equipment is relatively low. Like I have a utility pole in my front yard, and I would see it at an 8-foot height, mounting height. I would see it, but I have like a tree blocking most of the utility pole, right? So anything above 14 feet, I won't see. So anyway, if there's a way of getting it higher, I think I would prefer it higher. I think also on the AT&T project, we did require landscaping where there was no landscaping. I do understand we have vaults and utilities and things that make that more complicated, but I think that was part of the application. I don't recall if the board actually saw the actual landscaping plans, but I think at least maybe staff reviewed the landscaping. Also, I think we'd prefer to have, if there are pole-mounted equipment, I think we prefer not to see any wires. And I think my understanding is that on some of those brackets, the wires can be concealed within the bracket. And I couldn't quite tell if that was what was happening on your proposed brackets. And then on Town and Country, it seemed like those 3 locations are fairly well screened by the existing London plane trees. And I guess the question is, if you do co-location and then you have a ground-mounted cabinet, then is that blocking the sidewalk? And then I guess my question for staff is, at Town and Country, right on Embarcadero, like we don't have bike lanes, so people use the sidewalk for bicycling. We also have stadium days, football games and everything. And there's a lot of people coming in from Caltrain, right? They use that special Embarcadero station, and there's a lot of people. And that only happens, a few times a year, but it is like a major event. And so I would just caution staff that we should think about the, any impact if we have ground-mounted cabinets at that location. And then I guess the question is, if you do co-location there, does that mean 3 mailboxes, or is that like 1 or 2, right? I mean, it seems to me like 1 would be more acceptable than having 3 of them lined up like ducks in that particular location. On the art wrap, when I was looking at the sites on Tuesday, like none of the sites sort of struck me as being a place for art wrap. I didn't really think about it. Nothing really popped out at me. It seemed to me that a lot of these locations were just to try to make it as minimal as possible. That was my take on it. I think unlike the rest of the board members, I'm actually okay with the faux mailboxes. I'm okay with the faux trash cans or semi-functional trash cans. If it was in front of my house, I think I would prefer the mailbox to a trash can. That's my take on it. As it is now, people just, if they have trash, they just leave it at the curb, and I have to pick it up. And then I think on Peter's comment on colors, I think I'm in agreement with that. And I think that's all the comments I have. Let me see, brackets. Yeah, and I think I do agree with the location on 21. Is that right? Which one is the one with the 3-story? Yeah, 22. I think that's an issue with with somebody having a deck looking out to a utility pole with that directly outside their balcony. I think that's an issue. So do you want to have any follow-up comments for us?
Thank you, I do. And those were really great, thorough comments. That's exactly what we were looking for. I appreciate that you guys are good with the Node 22 moving across the street as requested by the lichens. So if you feel that that's something you're going to support, we'll put that in our formal application, as that will be the node location instead across the street.
We got the alternates, but I have not looked at it yet.
That's fine.
I think I understand generally what you're trying to do.
Okay, great. And then I wanted to, I believe it's Ms. Campagna with public comment. I just wanted to clarify. I wasn't quite sure. I think the citing criteria wasn't something that we had proposed. It was within the staff report. I didn't want to appear that we had said that's what we were going to do, and then we didn't at that location. And yes, we were aware of 362 Channing. That is a tough site. There, when we went out there was no quick alternatives or some that worked at that time. We'll certainly go back. But yeah, it's a beautiful home. It's beautiful. And you're right with the vaulting that's in the ground, and there's still some construction at that time. Well, when we walked it definitely in November, that was there, so that's not really a place there. I have spoke with Ms. Price, who is one of their representatives, and talked about the fact that we would like to, to talk with them and see all their alternatives, whether it's a landscaping there, or maybe that's where the equipment is that would be covered, that could be there. as we were talking, and I'm happy to have the project manager, John Griffiths, come up, and we were sitting back here talking as we're getting this feedback, that we will go out there and look. It's this balance. If we're, we're dissuaded from corners, though it allows us to have fewer nodes. So if that's the case, I don't know if at the corner would work, but certainly could go out there and maybe even moving the pole that's there a little further east may be an option. Is that something that you believe could be supported? Obviously that we have to talk to Mr. Fleming and see if that also works as well. So that's something to consider that we would like feedback on, if possible. But the other questions just were great, and like I said, I appreciate the feedback. And for the wood poles, I wanted to address a little bit of that as far as the shrouding and how that works. There are limitations that happens when we're shrouding equipment on utility poles, and so we do have some limits within then. I do like your comment about when we great if it was all one piece and it was made to look more like a wood kind of grain. But John, if you want to come up and talk about that a little bit, and he can explain what some of the restrictions are on making some of those changes, and maybe talk about where we can find some compromise.
Yes. Hi, John Griffiths, Crown Castle. What we've, in working with utilities and with PG&E, they require us not to be able to cover any of the wood structure for inspection purposes. So those shrouds, if we do put a shroud below that antenna, unfortunately, it can only go to the level of the actual metal mount, because they need to allow their inspectors per GO 95 to be able to inspect that pole from ground level and see where the wood attachments are in case of rot or something down the road. So, because we have proposed in the past in other areas a full shroud down, and that was denied from PG&E from that standpoint. So, and that's just on the wood poles. That's why in the metal poles, we were able to do that full shroud down and taper it into the pole.
Let me respond, Ed. I think if it were half an inch from the top of the wood pole, that would be acceptable. What you're showing is 4 feet above the pole. You can't see half an inch from the ground. We're looking for it to look like a wood pole all the way up.
Yeah, and again, that pole top extension is a wood. There's 2 metal brackets on either side, and that's wood in between. So even that cannot be covered. So
let me respond once more to my board members especially. There's a 150-day shot clock on this process. If they don't get real clear instruction, we're going to get coming back to us against something. If we still don't find it acceptable, it's either yes or it's approved. I want to be clear with you, there's got to be a way to create a shroud that conceals these antennas all the way down.
I mean, unless I'm wrong, doesn't the city own those poles?
Yeah, we don't have PG&E here. We have our own utilities.
correct.
But I mean, if the city owns them, we ought to be able to determine, what we put on them or what
The city does own the poles, and we do have a master lease agreement with, different cellular companies for the addition of these antennas. But there are certainly some limitations. The Crown Castle and cellular is looked at like a utility, that they have the right to go on these poles. We're just talking about the design of how it would go on the poles.
Well, I understand
And so
that.
I would
I
like to
understand
ask the applicant, there is that bayonet that I think Mr. Belte is talking about. It's currently proposed to be wood. If it was a metal material all the way through, potentially utilities would look at it differently and wouldn't have to be inspecting it as often.
It's definitely something we can circle back with your utility department and find out what
Well, then
their preferences are and what they'll
I'd be happier
allow.
with something metal that was painted to match the color of the wood rather than wood.
I didn't realize it was wood, yes, but what I'm after is to be super clear with these people. To me, at least, the standard is
I agree
same
completely.
diameter, color, and texture. That's pretty clear. You guys can figure out how to accomplish that, but that's what we're looking for. And that's
And I
what
don't-
I'm looking for.
Yeah, 'cause I wouldn't accept that.
No, that's not the same diameter.
I'm sorry, it's not even close.
Yeah.
In the case of pole replacement,
Is that,
Clarification.
in the case of pole replacements, it's my understanding that a bayonet is not necessary and the antenna could be mounted directly to the top of the pole.
That would also be acceptable, sure.
May I ask a clarifying question? You had mentioned the equipment and facing 9 o'clock versus 3 versus 12. I was hoping that we could have an opportunity to address that as well, of how that equipment has to orientate with climbing space and other, sometimes particular within that pole.
Yeah, when we walk these sites with your utility department, they're the ones who specified in what quadrant that they needed to be mounted in per that climbing space. And so we took their direction as far as what, 9 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 12 o'clock being towards the sidewalk. And
Can I respond to that? Basically, I don't want to see anything on the pole. So I don't care which way it's rotated, I don't want it there. So I mean, to me, that's a moot question. I want it undergrounded.
okay. Well, and again, this was based upon a pole.
Okay,
mounted
I understand
design,
that,
so-
but I meant, I don't really care if we argue about which way it's going to go if I don't want it up there in the first place.
I'd like you to understand that I also support that position strongly.
And I think also the staff, we have a pre-meeting before the ARB meeting. I think my understanding is that utilities have their own concerns about undergrounding and maintenance and whatnot. Is that correct? And so there's also other concerns. I mean, besides, we have our aesthetic concerns, and that's fine. And I think there are other concerns as well elsewhere in the city.
Okay, if that's the case, and I'm not saying I'm still not going to push for undergrounding, but hanging them on the poles is not going to fly with me at all.
Yes, I think that's fine.
It's about as plain as I can get.
So I would like to maybe ask the applicant, so as we discussed, utilities, our city utilities does have concerns about maintenance of underground equipment. But this is a, small cell equipment that would be underground, and maybe the applicant can speak to how the maintenance on such a thing might happen.
In regards to maintenance as it pertains to underground vaults or to pole mounted, again, we have our operational folks that do preventive maintenance as well as respond to any type of outage. They would obviously need to have access, if it were underground, access next to the curb on that to be able to gain access. Our pole mounted, generally they're either bilateral or they have bucket trucks. They're able to maintain it much like a Comcast or cable TV.
Also for the board members, I would say like some of the location, there's one location in particular that I saw where the homeowner had like roses all throughout the curb planting strip. And so if we're saying that everything has to be underground in vaults, then they're going to lose all of their plants. So I just want to give everybody a little bit of flexibility and don't give an ultimatum. And I think we understand you have a strong preference, but there may be a situation where underground is not feasible. I have one question for you guys too, since you're here at the microphone. Is there? I was looking on the internet. Is there a way to hide pole-mounted equipment behind signs? Like I was looking, and they were saying that if there's an existing directional sign, and then you just put it behind there. Is that considered effective? I mean,
it can. Again, with the equipment we're mounting, it wouldn't cover all, but we have used that in different applications. And again, you're getting that camouflage from one angle, but you wouldn't be getting it obviously from the other.
Can I just back up one more time to this whole thing with the undergrounding? Having lived in San Francisco for years where there aren't tree pockets or whatever, everybody just walks on the box in the sidewalk. So if the roses are there, you put it in the sidewalk and chase it to it.
yes, and I think in this application, there's I think the location near Gilman, I think that has it, and I think there's a vault in the
all I'm
sidewalk.
saying is the thing about,
Let's not-
one of the people has roses all the way across there. I agree, absolutely. Keep the roses and put it in the sidewalk and chase it to it.
Yeah, I think we're getting too nitpicky. I think we're just trying to give them general.
No, we're talking about, that's not a possibility. It is a possibility.
Nobody said it wasn't possible.
Okay.
Okay, I think,
May I ask one more
Yes.
clarifying question, please? And I'm glad that you raised the bench, because I was looking for something that would be appropriate, and that was perfect feedback. That's what I was looking for. You're suggesting working with the neighbors that are there regarding the bench and what would work or not work, or just coming and proposing a couple of different options? What would you suggest?
so the thing with benches in like downtown areas, a lot of times there's opposition to benches because it attracts people who loiter.
Sure.
There are also issues, sometimes the benches are, public benches are designed so that people can't lie down on them. And then I think previously we had mentioned concerns about these wireless benches is that they're high and they're really big and they're not real benches. They're not designed for comfort of people, right?
No, you said that in May, and that's why I was
Yes.
hesitant, like, oh, I don't know if I want to bring
But I
up a
don't
bench.
think, but in that particular location, I was thinking that it might be possible.
Okay,
I'm not
as an
recommending
exception.
it, I'm just saying that that could be an option in that particular location. It could make sense.
Thank you for that clarification, really
And
appreciate it.
I don't know anything about that particular property owner or what's going on there. But it seems to me a better option than putting it in front of the Landing Chateau building. Okay, how are we doing on time? Okay, I think we were allowing an hour for this one, so we'll
Thank
look
you
forward
again.
to a formal application.
Really wonderful feedback. Really
Great, thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much. Is item number 3, which is a public hearing for quasi-judicial matter, 1451 Middlefield Road, consideration of an application for architectural review to allow the demolition of the Junior Museum and Zoo building and construction of a new 15,033 square foot, one-story museum and education building, outdoor zoo with netted enclosure, and reconfiguration of and improvements to the existing parking lots. The environmental assessment is an initial study, has been prepared in accordance with CEQA, and the zone district is public facilities. And we have our Amy French, our chief planning official here.
Good morning.
Do we need a minute to set up the presentation?
I believe that's happening as we speak.
Okay.
We have a presentation from the applicant, 1451. Okay.
The lower one. Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Again, good morning. We've got our PowerPoint set up now. I wanted to call your attention to an email that came on Tuesday. That's a little confusing. They're referring to another issue on the Palo Alto Online. There is, I don't know where these numbers are coming from. I just wanted to give an overview on that. There's no loss of 85 parking spaces on the site. That is incorrect. There's no proposal to do anything at the school site, et cetera. I should mention, we will have our transportation engineering staff member in for this project if there are further questions about that. But just on the traffic note, the peak periods are, morning and evening peak commute periods. They're not affected by this project because this project is, the attendance at the zoo is not during those times. Just to cut to the chase, this is our second hearing for this project in a formal application. We've had several over the years for a preliminary review, and they've refined it to a point where we're pleased to make the recommendation for approval. This will be going to council hopefully in November. We're asking that you recommend the project today. We have some follow-up opportunities for tweaks to the landscape plan that we've noted in the conditions of approval. And as always, the ARB can have a ARB subcommittee to look at any resulting drawings. I'll just go ahead and turn this over to the applicant to make the presentation now. Thanks.
Thanks, Amy.
In front, you have 10 minutes.
Sure. We put together a short PowerPoint I want to kind of touch on, and we focus this basically on, I think, some of the major comments that we heard the last time that we were before you. Number one, big comment, architecture of its place. How do we move away from sort of this agricultural aesthetic on some of the way that the finishes were being presented? Second item was modulation, again, on Middlefield. Third, bridges, we can talk about that briefly. And then lastly was one of the maintenance questions as it relates to metal siding. And we're going to close with some of the wind facade pieces. So talking about architecture of its place, This is what we showed you last time. As you recall, we had the metal standing seam roof that wrapped and became wall siding as a sort of a continuous extruded form out at the front of sort of the main museum building with some additional metal siding over into here, and we had a different colored metal roof that kind of came around. We had lots of wood siding. It was the other material that wrapped the entire finish. The comments that we heard were, could we consider breaking the eave as a possibility? Can we look at a different type of material juxtaposition but not really lose the concept of the building? And think carefully also about the wood siding as well. So we went back to our diagram that we showed you early in a study session at the beginning of the year, and we kind of started to think about how does this translate with that extruded piece? And instead of just extruding the whole form out, we thought, well, what if the roof extrudes out and the building mass kind of sits somewhat separately? So this is sort of a diagram, and what we've come back with is a different way of looking at some of the materials. We've interjected cement plaster as a way to sort of further break up some of the mass and bring a little more playfulness and not just sort of have this monochromatic large amount of wood siding, and then also to kind of break up the metal. We're proposing to still have standing seam roof, which is this kind of charcoaly grayish material in through here. But then as you get down below, we've pulled back the wood now becomes more of an accent. The wood is an accent sort of back in only the recessed areas of the building. And then we have an off-white colored cement plaster that becomes more of the dominant color and material on the building. We've inserted some more playful windows to sort of break up this elevation and to still kind of have a modern aesthetic to try to attempt to echo, you know, parts of Lucy Stern in mass and form, and have a bit of an eave, that projects out so it no longer reads as sort of we believe is the building that it had read as sort of once before that we presented before you. There's an sectional elevation looking at that larger volume and sort of that niche entrance point where the wood is, and then looking into the Dawn Redwood courtyard at that elevation on that side. The second point to touch on briefly is the middle field elevation. We had presented, you know, this was the last elevation we had shown you. We had kind of broken the elevational facade into, you know, different sections, but the roof was kind of running long and sleek, and the feedback we got from, you know, several of the board members was, let's try to break this up a little bit more. Can we do some things to modulate that and be more sensitive to? And we were attempting to do that, I think, with sort of how this break is here with windows and wall. But what we went back and looked at was, we did a few things. One was we took where that break happened and we shifted it closer to our entrance portal. So if you go back to this, there's, you know, the piece that's over here kind of slides over a bit, and we have some pop-up clear story windows that come over into this zone here that then align with this wood accent wall material here. And then by interjecting different, the cement plaster against the wood and some additional window placement back over into here, we think that this starts to achieve that. You start to read this elevation into a series of smaller sections as opposed to one long sleek run. The last couple comments would be on the bridges. We've gone back to the clients, and they're looking to get some grant funding, and so we are putting bridges at least back into the project at this moment, funding permitting. And then here's the images we showed you last time. Further development of the Dawn Redwood courtyard that we're also looking at grant funding. They're looking at actually having a dinosaur sculpture out amongst the Dawn Redwood tree. And then last couple comments on maintenance questions. The metal roof, so we pulled back the metal material significantly from what we had before. We didn't touch on this last time, but it will have an integral colored Kynar 500 finish that will be pre-applied, so there's no plans to paint any metal roofing. We're going with this medium, there's a finish board going around, sort of a medium tone kind of charcoal gray, so the idea is that it will be compatible with if there's a potential for future photovoltaics. It'll kind of fall away in the sky to some degree and just kind of be there, as opposed to this really, you know, kind of reddish color that we were talking about before. And we've removed it completely from any sort of wall surfaces. So as far as the wood siding, it's a cedar that we would then apply a clear finish to. That was another one of the comments that we had before that we had noted. This is just a picture of the finish board that should be passed around in front of you. And then lastly, the wind facade. We're really excited to be working with the Arts Commission. They've selected an artist to provide a public art piece, Charles Sowers. He's got some really exciting science-based exhibits and art installations at the Exploratorium, and he's a local artist. We've met with him. Really excited about how to beautifully articulate wind onto the site, and so we are still looking at this front facade elevation into here. Signage off to the side like we touched on before as well. So that concludes kind of the high points, and we'll turn it over to questions and comments.
Great, thank you, Brent.
Thanks.
I don't have any speaker cards for this item, so we can move on to board member comments and questions. Any questions? Q?
That's great to hear that the artist is on board. I'm just wondering if that whole front gable facade becomes the art piece, has there been any thought given to where the museum signage will go then?
I'm just going to jump in, Amy French, because we're not interested in having the signage go with the art.
Right.
And so I'll just say that and let the applicant talk about where signage might go.
Hi, Sarah Vaccaro here with CAW Architects. We're partnering with Charles Sowers, the public artist. We've given him a handful of locations to look at for his art installation. One is on this main facade of the entry portico, and we've given him a lot of our inspirational images about wind and other science, nature-based exhibitry. He is developing his ideas right now. He's just at the beginning of his process, so we don't know exactly how his art piece will manifest, but we're working closely with him to integrate it into this front entrance plaza. And once we have a little more direction, then we can further design how that signage will be integrated.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like the art piece is still in flux, which is fine, but I think as I've been reviewing the project through the process, I've always assumed that the front was going to have this piece there, so it sounds like it may not end up being there. Is that correct?
If he does something differently, we will work to put something that's close to the look that we've been presenting.
Okay.
It's integral to the design.
And we've been strongly urging and moving in this direction as that this is sort of integral to the project.
Thank you.
But just to clarify, so the sign that's shown in the drawings, I mean, is not part of the ARB.
That is correct.
I mean, it's typically a staff reviewed.
It's a concept at this point. It's not they'll have to come back with a sign application for that wall signage. The existing sign that's moved, the sculptural one out front is okay, but this other one needs.
Any other questions? No. Peter?
Okay, thank you very much for coming back. And I'm right on the edge, but I think we can push this along. I agree with the applicant's outline of 5 different issues that we're looking at, so I'd like to address each one of them. Starting with the Middlefield Road elevation, I think that's a big improvement, and I think that fits in well now with the residential neighborhood. Of course, it's great if you can get those bridges back. I appreciate the effort you're making, and let's see where that gets us. As far as it being an architecture of its place, it's really close. To me, it still has a vague reminiscence of some agricultural industrial building, but certainly it's moved in the right direction sufficiently that I'm right on the edge of being able to say I think it's okay. Same thing on the materials, the metal siding and the wood slats and stuff. Obviously, it's great that you removed the vertical standing seam finish on the side of the building. You do have a lot of those cedar slats and stuff. When I look at the sample board you said here, I can't think of the last time we got a clear finish to stay on wood for more than a year. And I've been doing this 30 years now, and there's a lot of people doing a lot of maintenance on wood buildings I've built. I just don't see the city out there every year brushing those slats. Again, it's at the level where we've made that point clear over and over again. The look is great. But I think overall the findings can be made to support the changes to materials, and I think the logic of what you've done is right. I pick up on Q's questions about that gable end facade. Several times through this review process, he's been thinking that that's some sort of an artistic element, and I think it should be. When I see on this elevation here, I don't think is quite there yet. It looks just too much, for first blush, like the face of a Target store or something, and I think it needs more revision. I would like to see that come back to a subcommittee perhaps, and would like to see that really be a place where we incorporate some sort of public art or sort of interesting whimsical design on the, what you call the gable end, the windscreen. That said, I'm eager to hear what my colleagues have to say. Thank you.
Robert.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. I think it's come a long way. The middle field elevation, I think, is a big improvement. I also agree that this is still a little weak, but then if the public art is going to be part of that, that would make a big difference, and probably coming back to the subcommittee would be a good idea on that. The one piece that is the off-white color of the stucco, I think, is a bit bland. I'd like to see something maybe a little richer in color rather than the off-white. It seems like it's gone from one extreme to the other. To compensate for it, I'd prefer to see. It's not like there aren't residences or whatever in the area that aren't a richer color than off-white. So I agree the wood is going to be a maintenance nightmare probably. I mean, unless it's done properly, or even different types of finishes on it or something, because I agree that a clear finish is real tough to keep it looking good more than a year or so. Other than that, like I said, yeah, I'm probably close enough that we could, approve it, or I could approve it at this point with a few minor modifications.
Thank you, Robert. Q.
Yeah, thanks for hanging in there and going through the process. I think it's come a long ways, and I think even at the previous hearing, I was pretty much on board, and I felt that I could make the findings even then. So I appreciate you taking the extra step and bringing it back one more time. Just very minor comments, some of them echoing previous comments that were made, but I also agree that I'm probably the least experienced person of architecture profession on this board, and even having said that, I agree that the clear finish is just terribly difficult, and I think some kind of a semi-solid, or maybe even you just go with a solid stain on that, and I don't think you're going to have a lot of people observing it from up close and making sure that they see the wood grain and whatnot. So that's one thing. I also agree that the middle field elevation I feel it's actually greatly improved. I think your attempt at breaking that up is successful, and I like the way that you've approached that. I like the clear story window that's been added. I am somewhat questioning if that makes the building feel a little bit too high in that central portion. I don't know if there's a way of bringing the clear story down so that maybe it doesn't start at the ridge, but it's not a deal breaker to me. I think overall it's looking great. And I think that's it. I can make the findings. Again, I applaud your efforts in sticking through the process and coming up with a solution that, to me, doesn't feel compromised. I think you've really done a good job of instilling your own design efforts, and also working with the city. And I'd be happy to recommend approval of the project. Thank you.
Okay, and I can support the project as well. And I do want to thank the members of the public who've submitted comments by email. We've had several over the past 2 months. And I thank staff for responding to our questions. I think I had a question previously about parking, and I think that's been answered. And I think I just want to acknowledge that there is, like, the existing traffic, which is highlighted in the initial study, is that the traffic is bad on El Camino. It's acceptable, right, at level D. But it's headed down, the the cumulative impacts are going to push it down lower. So I think we just should be on the city's radar that we're going to have an issue at Embarcadero and Middlefield in the future. Okay, and then my only nitpicky thing is on landscape. So you have kind of like the zigzag wood fence along the park edge. Yeah, there's sort of a, yeah, and so I just want, if maybe that could come back to staff for review, is really how does the existing, is the existing irrigation for the lawn being retained? And if it's, I don't even know what it is, if it's rotors or whatnot, but you're going to get spray on the wood, and generally you get these whitewashed effects on the wood. And you're not showing any new landscaping there, so I presume I presume it's just trees and lawn there. But I just want to make sure that we just sort of address that when in the future, right? I mean, typically irrigation plans come before building permit, right? So.
Yeah, so just a note on that, the Rinconada Park long-range plan doesn't have specificity at this point. You know, it's looked at programmatically. Peter Jensen, our in-house landscape architect, I will be meeting with him following this meeting and make sure that he is aware of this concern of the, wrecking the fence basically with, irrigation, and we want to not have that happen to a brand new fence. So we'll make sure we touch base on that.
And presumably you have to change the irrigation, right? Because you're changing the boundary between the Junior Museum and the park, right?
Yes.
It's kind of so.
We'll make sure that's in the to-do list before.
Yeah, and then it's not, at the moment, that area is not part of the landscaping plans of the Junior Museum, right? That's still part of.
That's correct. That's why I was kind of
park.
taking over this comment, because it will be not in the purview of our architect here. And I should say Elizabeth Ames is here as well with the Rinconada long-range project, so thanks.
And then for staff on the findings, I just had one comment, little tiny comment, is on finding. This is finding number 3, which is page 63 of the packet, and this is just about pedestrian and bicycle safety. That I think I would recommend adding that one of the existing curb cuts along Middlefield is being removed. So that's actually a benefit to all the pedestrian traffic going to Walter Hayes. Great.
Thank you, will do.
Okay, I'm willing to entertain motions now. Q?
I'll move that we recommend approval of the project and trust that, it's a city project and that any other minor material things will be taken care of at the planning level. So I don't even think there's a need for anything to come back at subcommittee level.
How about the whole idea of the art piece or artwork?
I'm not too concerned.
Is
that something that has to be approved at the ARB level of some sort?
I didn't comment on the art piece. I do want to caution, sometimes the mounting of the art piece on a building can be an issue. We've had we had a low-income housing project, and the art piece was nice, but the brackets that attached it onto the building weren't really well thought out, and so I mean something like that could come back to the board for review if the board's interested.
I'd like to see that come back to subcommittee.
So I will accept the.
Okay,
Yeah.
I propose that the art piece, or however that's worked out, especially because we've talking about it may affect the front end, or the appearance of the front entry, obviously, considerably. I'd like it to come back to the subcommittee.
So we have a motion, but no second at this point?
Yeah, I'll second the motion.
And
Before he
then do we
makes the-
want to offer a friendly amendment?
Oh, okay, all right. Fine, then I'll make that.
Microphone?
I'll make that my friendly amendment.
I'll accept the friendly amendment.
I'll accept the second to the friendly amendment.
Thank you.
Can I ask a clarifying question? this amendment is to review the attachment of the art to the facade, if it's proposed to be on that facade. If it's not proposed to go there as artwork, you would like to see what is going to be showing on that facade, on that gable end?
I think so, yeah.
And this would also go, this is going to go to the public or art commission as well, right?
Yes, they're looking at the content of the art as well as the installation. I think it's more if the artwork doesn't go on that gable end, what is the gable end
Okay,
going to look like?
but the artwork, I mean, I sit on an art committee for another city, and we look at the art piece and don't always, you know, go into depth as to how it relates to the building adjacent to it or behind it or whatever the case is, and I think we should.
I tried to clarify just, I think, how the ARB subcommittee, if the art is not going on that gable end, you're very interested in what that's going to look like if it's not an art piece. I think that's what I'm picking up on. Is that?
That's correct.
And if it is an art piece, just to see what it looks like in the end,
And how it's mounted.
mounting of it.
Okay, and then just to clarify, the motion is a recommendation to council, because this is going to the council, it's not a director's decision. And, okay, so, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. So that's 4-0 with board member Firth absent. Congratulations, we can't wait to see this one under construction. It's going to be very exciting. Great. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we will hear item number 4, which is 2120 Staunton Court. Okay, we're ready for item number 4. This is a public hearing for a quasi-judicial item, 2120 Staunton Court. Recommendation on applicant's request for approval of a major architectural review to allow the demolition of 2 existing dwelling units and construction of a new 3,124 square foot duplex. The environmental assessment is exempt from the provisions of CEQA in accordance with guideline section 15301 for existing facilities, and the zone district is RMD with the NP overlay. And we have our project planner, Adam Peterson. Welcome.
All right. Good morning, Chair Liu, members of the Architectural Review Board. As noted, I'm Adam Peterson from the Planning Community Environment Department. I'm here today to present a major architectural review for 2120 Staunton Court. The project before you today proposes to demolish the 2 existing single-family homes and shed at 2120 Staunton Court and construct a new duplex and associated site improvements. This is the first review of the project by the Architectural Review Board, and staff is recommending approval to the Planning and Community Environment Director after your consideration of specific conditions of approval in the project. The project is located on the corner of Staunton Avenue and Staunton Court and Oxford Avenue. The project is surrounded by a mixture of uses. There is a new mixed-use project going in more to the northeast of the project site. There's some single-family uses located to the southeast and to the southwest. This is a 2-story single-family use that you'll see, and there are some multifamily uses surrounding the project site as well. This is the site plan for the project before you. The project has basically a 4-foot-high wood fence along Staunton Court with paved access easement or paved access to the backyard. It would pull out 3 street trees along Oxford Avenue and replace those with 3 new street trees. There's 2 new driveway curb cuts that are being proposed for the project, and the project would also include trees on site. One located towards the corner of Oxford Avenues in Staunton Court, and the other located towards the secondary driveway. The project also provides bike parking on site as well. This slide shows you a rendering of the project. The project includes Benjamin Moore Swiss coffee colors, wood board and batten siding, wrought iron gates that obscure the light wells to the basement from the street. It also includes a standing seam metal roof, a composition black roof on top of the 2nd story, and then Anderson windows with black trim. As noted, the site is in the neighborhood preservation overlay zone. And what that zone does is it requires the ARB to evaluate the project for its scale, silhouette, facade articulation, and materials relative to other buildings in the neighborhood. This shows the streetscape for the project. The top is the Staunton Court elevation. Again, this is a single-story, single-family home located in between multifamily and then the proposed duplex here. On the bottom, we have the duplex project from Oxford Avenue. This is the duplex, single-family, and then more sort of multifamily located further to the southwest of the project site. I want to quickly just walk through the elevations. Again, it's a 2-story duplex. There is a basement that's proposed to it. The top elevation is the elevation from Staunton Court, and the bottom elevation, or the bottom image, is the elevation from the driveway, or from the backside of the site. This is, again, the elevation from Oxford Avenue at the top, and this is the elevation at the back or the rear yard that's obscured from public views. In terms of the key considerations for this project, it's consistent with the comprehensive plan and the zoning code. It did undergo an individual review or IR review evaluation, and there's conditions of approval that are incorporated to ensure better conformance with the IR guidelines. These include specifically extending the roof edge along the front porch, and then also extending the roof and the roof eaves and rakes. There's the proposal to use alternative paving in the single-car parking space, planting 15-gallon trees along the interior and side lot lines to better obscure any sort of views or better conceal privacy. And then also widening the window on the 2nd floor bedroom of the Staunton Court elevation. Staff did receive public comment about this project initially, or straight from the get-go. There's an adjacent neighbor who's concerned about a redwood tree that's located off-site from the project. The applicant came back and crafted a response with their arborist to the neighbor's response, and the neighbor did say that they were very pleased by the applicant's response and by their redesign of the project. Yesterday, we also did receive comments and email from the neighbor. This was forwarded to you. The neighbor was concerned about a public works condition of approval and an urban forestry condition. I followed up with the Public Works Department or the Engineering Department about their condition. Essentially, the way that condition is written is that there's multiple ways to go about complying with the C3 requirements, and so it doesn't have to be the specific way that this neighbor articulated. In regards to the tree conditions, we're going to make sure that all construction and anything that goes on with the project respects the tree protection zone. So based on this information, the staff's recommendation is that the ARB recommend approval of the project to the Planning Community Environment Director. Thank you, and I'm free to answer any questions that the board may have.
Great, thank you. And so the applicant, you will have 10 minutes for your presentation.
Thank you, Adam. Good morning. My name is Natalie Hyland. I'm actually very excited to be here because we've been looking forward to getting on this calendar for a while now. I am the building designer for this project. I'm also here with the property owner, Zach Traylor, and our arborist, Ray Mornay. I thought I'd just give you a quick introduction, a simple overview, and then be available for any questions you might have. Zach Traylor is a Palo Alto native. He's been in real estate for over 15 years, and he recognizes the need for decent housing in Palo Alto and saw this as an opportunity to bring units that are accommodating to Palo Alto. He loves his town, he loves the trees, and he likes to keep things simple, truly just wanting a project that would fit in with the neighborhood. So the project does conform with all of the planning ordinances. We're not asking for any variances or special exceptions. The first person Zach did hire was Ray, our expert arborist, and initially the plans were designed around the arborist report, of course. But during plan check, as Adam mentioned, we received a letter from a neighbor, and it generated an on-site meeting with Dave Doctor, your town arborist, Ray, Zach, and myself. So we scrutinized the design very, very carefully, making sure we're protecting. And let me back up. There's a very large redwood tree in the southeast corner of the property. So obviously the arborist report is about saving this tree, but there are also a lot of little trees around the area. But the neighbor's concern was the redwood tree. So we focused a lot on the protection tree zone, making sure we took out the concrete, making sure there was nothing structural or permanent in that area. And then we also had some preliminary meetings with a structural engineer who's going to allow us to do a shot creek basement so that we're not protruding into the roots as much as possible. So in summary, it did take several months, 3 updated arborist reports, but we do have Ray and Dave and the neighbor, which Adam told me is full support, which is great. It is an eclectic neighborhood. There's a big apartment unit on the left, towards the left. There's single family towards the right, mixed commercial, mixed residential, a lot of different architectural styles. We went with transitional farmhouse, something modern, something fresh, and we believe it does blend in well with the unit across the street. So we are proposing a 2-story, 2-unit building. Each has its own basement, adequate parking, bicycle parking. There's some nice external circulation. And I have this colored rendering. Sorry, I'm not familiar with. Here's our color material board. I do have a bag of samples you're welcome to see. And we are proposing high quality materials. So what stands there today are just 2 cottages in pretty poor condition. They're quite frankly an eyesore to the neighborhood. We believe this project will improve the town and bring in some decent housing as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any, I don't have any speaker cards from the members of the public. Are there any board member questions? Peter?
Yes, very much so. I would like to see the materials and the colors. And to staff, I guess, this is the first time I've seen an application come to us with so little description of how the building's going to look. There's not a single rendering, there's no colors, materials, anything presented, and yet you're putting it to us. What am I missing here?
So when I reviewed the project in the plans, I was looking at the board and batten siding. I was seeing the standing seam metal roof, the composition roof. The colors, yes, weren't there, but yeah.
The colors are not on the drawings whatsoever. And
So we do acknowledge that the elevations, we certainly should have had the colors and materials, gotten that on the elevations. We could certainly bring that back to subcommittee to verify that that is done, if that's necessary.
No, okay, thank you.
I have a question for the architect. Why is there a different roof on the second floor versus the first floor porch?
A couple reasons. It's part of kind of that transitional style where you kind of do a mix and match of industrial versus traditional. Just kind of to keep the interest. I don't think you'll see as much of the composition roof from the perspective of the street as the standing seam, but it was just more for cosmetic purposes.
Great. And then are you in agreement with the conditions of approval? But we have the individual review consulting architect who's asked to make some changes to like the bay windows and the garage door. And the eaves, like 2-foot eaves. Are you in agreement with that, or do you have any
Yes.
disagreements?
No, we're in agreement with that.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that.
I have a quick question. On your section BB, you're showing that you're proposing to use a roof truss as the second floor roof structure. And at the same time, on your floor plans for the second floor, you're showing what seems to be a slightly raised ceiling at the center of those bedrooms. And I'm wondering how you're going to do that with the truss being flat-bottomed as you're showing in the section.
To be honest, I'm not sure if this roof will be trussed yet.
Okay.
We'll probably go through that with the structural engineer, so I think that was just a discrepancy. But I think we will try to get as much height and volume in those rooms, so most likely it'll be stick frame.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just have one quick question for staff. The statement just sort of surprises me a little bit. On page 268, second paragraph from the bottom, at one point you're talking about the standing seam roof, and it says the difference between that and the other roof, it says, but it's also compatible with the composition roofing because it consists of a durable roof material. So we're now using durability as an element of compatibility? Really? I think that's pushing it a bit.
Okay, and then also for staff, under finding number 5 on page 276 of the packet, I just want to point out, it says, the applicant has designed the project to respect natural features by designing a project that will adversely impact with the adjacent protected redwood tree. Yeah, I think there's something missing there. And then also in that same paragraph, it says, each of these proposed features creates a desirable habitat for plants. And I think what we're looking for is for wildlife. Who wants to go first? Robert?
Can I ask first?
Yes.
Is the color and material board a tangible thing we can hold, this piece of paper here?
This.
But
Should we
if-
do a walkthrough of that? Why don't we do?
No, it's more this, Alex. If we're being asked to approve this, and I think we are, how can we have any record of what these things are if it's not written down? All we have is Adam's presentation that these are Black Anderson windows. And this color and material board is typically at least one place where we put that.
Right,
I'm
so we
just
can,
wondering, can you submit the color and material board that you're presenting digitally? Do you have it?
Absolutely, and I don't want to speak on behalf of staff, but it was originally submitted in the first submittal, and we went back and forth about 4 times, and I think it just got lost through the cracks on the resubmittal. It wasn't resubmitted. It is just an 8.5 by 11. It's very simple. Is there something more you guys would prefer? This was my first time up.
No, I just want something for the record.
Okay, so that would be fine if I just printed the color.
Is it here now?
I believe it might be in the original package that was submitted. It should be.
You want me to start? Okay, let's see. A couple of things. Just looking at the initial elevation, I'm really not a big fan of what I call mirror image architecture, where you design half the building, then you do the mirror image on the other side, which is both the front and the back are exactly like that. This whole thing about having 2 different types of roof system, or I should say finishes, no, even if they are considered compatible, to me they're not. I just don't really like that look. I don't think it works. Also, I'm not a big fan of having board and batten for the entire structure. I just don't think this project lives up to the quality of what's expected in that neighborhood. I can't approve it the way it is.
nice and clear, Robert, thank you. Peter?
I prefaced my notes on, I study things, and I said everything I'm going to say is subject to reviewing the colors and materials. And I'm sorry, but it's just really hard to understand what's really being proposed. Okay, that said, I'm not quite as strong about it as Robert is, but I feel that the Oxford Street facade is rather long and unbroken up, and I would prefer to see a design that emphasized perhaps that it's 2 buildings, or 2 homes, not one. Probably that's just the lower roof there. In the same vein, I think that the facade facing Staunton Court, or really the corner that you see when you first approach, is somehow not your strongest part of the design. It's like the building was designed to be in a row of buildings, and you only had an Oxford Avenue facade. It's a corner of a building, and that's a really important corner. Everybody who turns up Oxford Avenue is going to see that corner of your building, and yet it looks like the side that's never been meant to be seen. So I think it could be improved. I'm not quite sure where the board is going to want to take this whole thing. I was inclined not to push it too much, but then I dug into the IR findings that Arnold made for us, and I find them, as usual, detailed and thorough, almost too much so. But then I looked at the conditions of approval with these findings, and I found most of them seemed to make sense, but they raised a question to me about the roof pitches. And what you're showing on your drawings is a 5 and 12 pitch on both the upper and the lower floor, except the dormers, which seem to be steeper. It's not too clear what they are, but they're obviously steeper. And the more I scratch my head on it, the more I think that probably Arnold was right, that the lower roof should be a slightly lower pitch. That's usually how you do it with the standing seam and the comp thing. But the dormers probably should be the same as the pitch of the roof above it. It'll look odd if they're not. So listening to everybody speak right now, I'm starting to think that those roofs may need another go-round of just really thinking hard as the designer. What's the appearance you're after with these? Is the roof intended to be so long along Oxford? And do you have these different pitches under control, or are you just throwing it out there yet? The other comment I see from the staff about the garage doors shall be stained wood, I'm surprised you find that acceptable, because what you're presenting on your color board is an aluminum frame with glass door. There's no way to make that stained wood. I don't know any developer who would want to build a house with a stained wood door. That's a maintenance nightmare. Usually it's only when somebody really spends the money on mahogany or teak that you do that. I don't think that's a good recommendation from staff, and I'm left with the feeling that nobody's really reading these things. You're just agreeing, and you're just going to change it later or something. And the same thing, there's a question here about extending the head trim 4 to 6 inches beyond the jamb, and I'm just uncomfortable with that level of architectural detail from us. So those two conditions I would change, 17 and 15. Otherwise, I'm fine with them if you are. Then I'd like to just take this chance to publicly address the council, really, through this project, that this is exactly the kind of project in Palo Alto that really emphasizes how our zoning ordinance is a bit showing its age. This is the kind of property that would be very well suited to have 4 homes on it with 4 parking places rather than 2. The developer's being driven by the zoning code to only have 2 houses. They're making them larger, they're more expensive homes. The council really needs to hear that this is the kind of place where a zoning amendment would allow different kinds of development. So it's not an architectural issue, it's nothing to do with our findings here, but I'd like to just make that statement that this is an example of where zoning could change. So I'm eager to hear what everybody else has to say. Thank you.
Could I speak to that too, Peter? That last comment?
Can we wait and we'll get back to you.
Sure.
We'll allow you to speak again. Q.
Thank you for the project. I'll start at the conditions of approval and the conditions that we've been recommended to reply about. I agree with Board Member Balte that 17 I'm not in agreement with. I think it's going a little bit too far. 16, changing all the overhangs to 24 inches, I don't think we should require that unless for some reason they feel strongly about doing that. I'm also against 13. I don't quite understand the reasoning behind that. But, you know, just kind of summarizing Board Member Balte's comments, I think there are a lot of things here that have been kind of lost, and I like the project. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think I kind of understand where planning is coming from when they asked us to recommend approval, because I kind of feel that way too, and I think it's just a matter of spending just a little bit more time picking up the loose pieces here and making sure that everything's coordinated, because we don't see a materials board. We don't know what this alternative paving is going to be like for the extra car parking spot. And then just in the package alone, it's always nice to get some 3D images and perspective views so that we can see more of the massing and the ins and outs of the buildings and the further refinement of details that we typically look at. I already asked my question about the ceiling height for the roofs. I don't see why this project shouldn't just all be standing seam metal roof. I don't agree with the statements that were made in the report as far as the composite shingle. I think if you're going with the board and batten look, you're obviously going after a look that's very sought after by the market these days. I think it just makes sense to make everything standing seam metal roof, and also to change the pitch of those dormers down to 5 and 12. I think maybe the logic behind that was once you lower the pitches there, that those elements don't stick out as much, but I think it can still work, or I think you still have height left to play with. Maybe everything should just be 6 and 12 rather than 5 and 12. But there's just a little bit of extra little details here and there, I think, throughout. But I think overall, I very much like the project. I want to approve it, or I want to recommend approval of it. But the materials board is pretty big. And I don't think there's anything in addition to that. I think a lot of good comments have been made. Thank you.
Okay, so I think of all the comments that have been made so far, I think I'm somewhere in between Peter and Q on this one. I think some of the IR comments from our consulting architect were like too detailed, and then in his comments he was allowing for some flexibility right? And then somehow in the conditions of approval, it just got set in stone. And I'm not comfortable with going as far as that on this one. If you start changing the overhang depth and the pitch, things happen. Like having a shallower pitch and steeper pitch, that affects the overhangs. So I don't want to make it too strict. I think the designer should have some flexibility in there. Generally with overhangs, more than 12-inch deep is considered better for water and environmental sustainability, shadowing of the facade. So generally I'm supportive of larger, usually larger looks better. I also on the garage door thing, I think I don't support that, the requirement for stained wood. I think that's really too detailed for this particular review. Again, also, I think on the head trim thing, that's like too detailed. I was wondering about the redwood tree. I think my understanding with like redwood trees is that like the roots can go up to 100 feet out from the tree. And I was wondering, has there been any investigation about how, like, about the tree roots? Or are we just assuming the minimum 10-foot requirement, which is a standard requirement for this kind of tree in the city? Has there been any more? Okay.
Extensive is the answer.
Okay, so
Yeah.
the city and Dave Doctor are all on board with this particular
Oh,
approach
yes.
and the shotcrete of the foundation stuff. Okay, that's fine. Okay, and so, Mr. Traylor, I think you had a comment on Peter Balte's comments?
Sure, just in general, thanks so much for the feedback. I think we're all mutually incentivized to create a great project for our city. So that's what we're trying to do. You can see that we're pretty much willing to do whatever you recommend. So thank you for your comments. Robert, all I would ask for you is rather than just say it doesn't meet the quality, give us your feedback and ask us to do things that would meet the quality, and we're happy to do it. We're here to comply with you all and make it a great project. To Peter's comment about the housing units, just a little color and background on this project. The single-family home next door we also own, and we went through a series of processes with the city to try and make this a bigger development with more housing. The tricky part is the house next door is zoned CN. We're zoned RMD, which is a little bit out of its sorts for the location. RMD I don't think is an appropriate zoning for this property, but so to your point, we did try to make more units across both properties, and we were denied before we even got too far. So what we did was we said, let's just give the town something that they can approve. Let's not fight them. Let's not go through this battle. We want to create housing. That's what the city's asked us to do, and we're excited to do it. So we gave we gave you a project we thought was compatible with the location without asking for any exceptions with regards to square footage, FAR, setbacks, anything. So we're here to build what you guys think is great. Please give us your feedback. Let's all work together and get this approved. I think we're at 2.5 years on this now. From this submittal on this project, we're at 10 months. So we're excited to move forward. Please do let us know what we need to do to get it going. Thank you very much.
Maybe I'll add a comment that I found this project to be a little bit more fascinating because of the zoning, the RMD zoning. Typically, if this lot were zoned, let's say, R2 or even RM15 or 30, as long as it's a substandard lot and less than 3 units, it wouldn't have to come to the ARB. It's only because it's RMD zoning that it comes to us. So, there are a lot of other things such as the basement, in RM15 and 30, it would count towards the FAR. Because it's RMD, it doesn't count. And so there are a lot of things here and there that I think made it a little bit tricky, and I certainly understand to a certain extent Mr. Traylor's process.
Thank you.
Well, I agree with you, Q, and I'm really torn. I'd love to just set these folks on their way. This is a simple project, and the guts of it meet our requirements and findings. And I'm very sympathetic. 10 months is an awful long time for a simple project like this, and it's frustrating. We're frustrated. You're frustrated. I make my comments because City Council is frustrated. they also recognize that it's just not clicking somehow. We all want higher density housing, and yet you guys can't do it. Staff can't approve it because it's not in the code.
Yeah.
So, look, I'm just putting it out there so the conversation is held. I'm not stating a personal opinion on it. And the architecture board certainly doesn't, in my understanding, doesn't have an opinion on these things. We're here to enforce the code as they exist. Are we ready to put this along with some conditions, or?
I'm in support of the project, and I will leave it to you two to make a motion.
I mean, I absolutely share your comments, Alex. Changing these roof pitches changes the way it looks. Changing overhangs changes the way it looks, and it's not for us or the staff to make these kind of flat-out statements. You have to do something. The designer needs to go through it and do it. Can we give it a quick feedback, come back on continue this with a date certain, a couple of weeks, and you guys do one pass at it? Will that work for you, you think?
I think that's fine. Also, you could make it conditions to approval that we're happy to comply with. We're literally willing to do whatever you tell us to do.
Just to make a point against the pitches, the dormers are steeper pitch just to give it a more farmhouse look, just to give that steep. But I do believe we do have the height limit. So if you'd like us to have matching pitches, we can kind of find an in-between, and I think still accomplish that. All standing seam roof, no problem.
No problem.
No problem at all. The color and material board is very simple. It's white, black windows, high quality, metal.
I'd like to move that this project be continued to a date certain, that it come back to us with a final design that incorporates all the comments we've made and the IR has made. None of them are required. All of them need to be considered in the design you bring back to us. Can the board support that concept?
I can support that, and I can also support subcommittee. Looking on the dates, I think for staff, it looks like October is fairly full, especially like the 19th meeting, but November looks light, right? November 2nd, there's one item. November 16th, there's one item.
I would just comment, that's 2 months away. We were talking about a few weeks, right?
So I think the issue is staff has, well, it's up to staff. Staff has a turnaround time to, and we have to do noticing. They have to turn around staff report. There are other projects, so.
Given Robert's strong feelings, I'm reluctant to think it's appropriate to send it to subcommittee. I wish we could just do this really quickly. There's no way to, it won't take long to put it on a very soon hearing.
Well, it's already, so it's September 21st. So you're thinking, you want it to go to one of the October meetings?
Yes.
So
if I may, so October 5th would only give a few days for revisions, and there would be no staff report possible for October 5th. October 19th, I mean, usually when we bring things back to the ARB, a month between is really the quickest turnaround that we can usually do and have any meaningful revisions. The 19th is fairly packed with other items.
yeah, and those are big items. Those are not, those are major, those are huge projects.
They are. I do think that the Park Boulevard project would be the one that would have to drop off. That is an office project that can't be approved until March. And so delaying them a little bit wouldn't delay their ultimate approval.
I don't want to get between you and the chair scheduling the meetings.
So I guess I would say, I mean, if you're looking to continue it, it looks like November 2 is the date. I mean, that's the date where we've got one other item on the agenda. The October 19th has got 4 other, pretty significant items. Even if one of those drops off, I still think you're here the whole morning. It sounds also, though, like the changes are, I'll defer to the board on this. I mean, are these changes pretty straightforward to make? And is this, I mean, if this is going to be a 5-minute conversation, when it comes back, then I don't, we'll find a way to make it work on the 19th and just dispense with it if you've got confidence that that can be the case.
I'm okay with that.
I'm also okay with that. Yeah.
Okay, well then try a motion.
So then the motion is to continue this to October 19th, and the applicant is to come back to us with the design revised based on the comments from the IR review and our conversation today. None of the comments are binding, but all of them should be considered. And then we'd like to see a real color and material board and a rendering for how this fits into the community at that time.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion by Board Member Balte and seconded by Q. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Robert and Firth absent. So it's 3-1, right?
No, I said aye.
Oh, you said aye? Okay, sorry about that. So that's a 4-0-1. Okay, we will see you on October 19th.
Thank you.
Thank you,
very
guys.
much. Thank you.
Why would I vote against a scheduling issue, not, right?
Well,
Well, you want to do the, it's only 11, so you want to do the bicycle one?
Subcommittee's going to be quick.
Yeah.
yes. So we Okay, so the last, yes, I think the last major item is public hearing for a quasi-judicial item, 392 California Avenue, recommendation on the applicant's request for approval of a minor architectural review to allow changes to the facade of an existing commercial building in the California Avenue Business District. The facade changes include a new storefront window system, an individually illuminated channel letter sign, and a new custom abstract mural by artist Victor Reyes. The environmental assessment is exempt from the provisions of CEQA in accordance with guideline section 15301 for existing facilities and 15311 for accessory structures. The zone district is CC2 RP, which is community commercial, and we have project planner Scott McKay. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Lou, Vice Chair Kim, and board members. I have a brief PowerPoint presentation here for the project I'd like to just run through. So yeah, we have this is basically the image of the proposed storefront showing the the new signage, the window system, and the mural. We have the project overview here. It's basically, there's those three components: the storefront window system, the individually illuminated channel letter signage, and the mural. I have a detail here for the signage itself, and basically has white translucent faces. It has black returns, internally illuminated LEDs, and we have an existing and proposed elevation here also. The motion, we're recommending approval of the proposed project. Well, recommending that you propose that the project's approved by the Director of Planning and Community Environment based on the findings and conditions in the staff report there. And there's a couple other potential motions that could be made there. And also have some images here of other existing murals in the California Avenue Business District. A lot of the murals, the existing murals in the business district there were commissioned through the public art process, and they're maintained by the city. There's, a lot of them went through that process. There are some murals that are, were done outside of that process, but just wanted to note that some of the murals in those images were commissioned through the city's public art process. I also, you should have at your places there, I have a comment that came in, after the staff report was prepared, and it's, there's basically 2 points in there. The first one just has to do with the overall size of the signage, and I think the person who wrote this, is considering the entire thing as signage, whereas, we're looking at just the Summit Bicycles lettering as the actual sign, and then the mural is kind of a distinct and separate part of the project, and then the second comment was just that it is much larger than in that speaking to whether it fits in with the neighborhood, and so those are the comments that came in. We have Rebecca Pollard from Terry J. Martin Associates here, as well as Victor Reyes, the artist for the mural. And if you have any questions for staff or for the applicant, we'd be happy to take those.
Great, thank you, Scott. And for the applicant, do you have a presentation? You have 5 minutes if you want to make a presentation. It's a minor.
Good morning. My name is Rebecca Tacker Pollard. I really don't have much to add to Scott's summary. I just wanted to put up again, this is currently what the facade looks like, and we're changing it with the mural and the signage and the new color in the storefront system. But really, I'm just here with the artist to take any questions you may have.
Great, thank you. So are there any questions from the board? Q, or no?
Yeah. Has there been any consideration to the color? I mean, does it have to be black and white? Has there been any thought of maybe using a color that is existing on the building, or?
Hi. So this is a discussion between the owner, Ian, and myself, and I presented work. Just a little background on me. I'm from San Francisco, so it's close by. I've done a lot of work there. I could name a few of my clients, but I do a lot of this exterior, interior enhancement. And so this is a signature style that I'm kind of known for. Like Twitter has a bunch of paintings of mine in their office, and goes on with those type of tech companies that are not too unfamiliar to down here as well. I recently did something down the peninsula on the LinkedIn campus. It's a similar motif to this, but it's in color. And I think because Ian, the owner, has several bike shops that have the same motif, that's why it's a callback to those. It's a bit of a branding, but not heavy-handed. It's more in the purview of the style I draw. And this has some elements that also inform bicycling. You see the circular image, which could be the chain spoke or the tire. And so I don't think we're opposed to changing any colors, but just if you want to know where the color originates, that's the essence of it. Yep.
Okay, comments? Peter?
Okay, I'll start. It certainly is a beautiful mural.
Thank you.
However, I am opposed to putting it on the facade of the building.
Okay.
Okay, the first issue to me is the question, is this a sign or is this an architectural facade treatment? And I find it a very close call. Okay. Honestly, to me, this is a mural as an abstraction of bicycle wheels above a bicycle store. Comes very close to me whether this is a sign or not to begin with. Mm-hmm. But I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. It's not a sign. It's an architectural facade treatment. Then I say, well, it's not very suitable architectural facade treatment. You won't see this in other buildings up and down California Avenue or throughout Palo Alto. You just don't treat buildings with murals as canvases. And,
right.
And I find that to be problematic. And I extended a little bit further and I said, if all store facades were murals, we would end up with a cacophony of architecture, which is not desirable. So it's that simple. I can't support this part of your application. I can support approving this with the condition that the mural not be placed on the facade here. Thank you.
Robert.
Yeah, I mean, I had the same concept that it sure looks like a big sign to me, basically. I mean, the lit portion, which is supposedly the sign, is also black aluminum, as you put, with white letters, and then on a black and white background. I mean, I'm sorry, the average person is going to look at that, and I agree. It's to me an abstract bicycle, pedal and part of a frame. I mean, so I have a real problem with that. And you're right, it is a very overpowering, I mean, there are murals all over Palo Alto. Some are cute, some are colorful, whatever, but this is a very striking, edgy mural. And I mean, I like the mural itself, don't get me wrong. I like the mural, it's just, I'm having a real hard time.
I understand.
I mean, it overpowers that building and overpowers the street. Part of it I would be happier to see, for instance, the Summit Bicycles letters be put on, for instance, the overhang, and then the mural itself be reduced by, let's say, 20%, so it actually is a smaller mural that then is wrapped by the building rather than coming to the outer edges of the building and overtaking the building.
I see.
And that way there's no distinction, or I should say, there's a definite distinction between the murals on the wall, the sign is on the overhang. And, California Avenue and other areas have the signage on the elevation, so I'd be happier with a solution like that.
Thank you. Q.
Yeah, I like the mural. I think it's a beautiful piece of art, and I've been on your website and seen some of the other artwork you've done. So
thank you.
I actually don't think it's too much for Palo Alto, but I think it may be a little bit too much for the location and the elevation of the building that it's being proposed on. Mm-hmm. There is a precedent on California Avenue for wall murals, but I think typically they're on sidewalls or in alleys, and I'd hate to lose the mural. I'm wondering if there are ways that maybe it can be on the alley elevation instead, or maybe a portion of the mural continues to the front so that it draws you into the alley. But I think for it to be just this front elevation, especially facing California Avenue, is a little much. I think I could maybe get behind it a little bit more if it were to blend in with the building a little bit, and that's why I asked about the colors. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If it could be more of the existing color of the building, maybe that's a way that it blends a little bit more and doesn't have so much of a pop. nobody's commented about the storefront system change yet, but I'll just make a quick comment that it looks like one of the mullions is being removed. So the top mullion that currently goes across the top of the doors is being eliminated essentially, am I correct?
That is correct. And we were a brighter aluminum, and now it's a darker color.
Okay, so is the aluminum there, this aluminum? Is the aluminum storefront represented somewhere here on the materials board? The oil rubbed bronze metal frame?
It was called out in an image, but I don't believe we have a material sample for it.
Okay. From just looking at it and my experience of other very similar materials, I don't think I have too much of a problem. I think maybe the oil rubbed bronze is playing off of the mural, which is black and white, but I caution you because of that eave overhang. You never get a view where it really connects both above and below the overhang. So maybe there's something that can be done there that doesn't make it pop as much, but.
If I may comment to that, part of the reason for the change in the storefront system is that when the owner moved in as a new tenant, the existing system was damaged.
Okay. Yeah, I'll leave my comments at that. Thank you.
So thank you. I think that I actually like the mural a lot. I like the graphic a lot, and and then the where I'm stuck is the black and white, because you picked out it seems like fairly high. You've picked of the choices in the range of whites and blacks and charcoals. I think you've picked about as dark as you can go, and I think in the back of my head I was thinking. If it could be reduced. That was my main question. Black is kind of like, as an architect, black is unforgiving. It shows every flaw, and if you make it, I think you're showing maybe flat paint, but if like anything glossy, I mean, any imperfection shows, and white paint on stucco shows any speck of dirt. And so I was wondering, I guess my question is, could it be reduced? Otherwise, I could support the project. I think I had also, I think, who is it? Q? I think you were asking for Robert, on the sign on the overhang. That was sort of in the back of my head, too.
Yeah, it gets it away from it's part of the other thing is like I said, I was thinking, if, let's say for sake of argument that the mural is yellow, and then you keep the signage as black and white, then it's obviously one's a mural, one's the signage. And, and it still doesn't detract from the quality of the mural. I'd rather see that. I think we're all having a problem with the black and white. It's very severe, and it may, standing on its own, that's one thing, but incorporated like this, I'm having a problem with it.
Okay.
So I'd be willing to accept like I said, a different color and then keep the signage black and white. And then to me, then it's obviously different, and I wouldn't have a problem with it.
Okay. I think I'm in agreement.
He wanted to make a comment, so.
Yes.
Speaking to the black and white and the color and the composition scale, I think that's all good critique, and I think we can take that and transform it into something more palatable for the environment without much struggle, a couple clicks on a computer. I do this a lot, and again, I'm going to go back to my conversation with Ian. He wanted high impact, and I think in some of my renderings I went low impact because I visited the site and I didn't know how rigorous the review process would be, but just kind of feeling the vibe of the street, excuse my language, I just didn't think black and white was the way to go. But I think he wanted a higher impact, so he was like, no, let's go black and white. And so we can always scale it back. Like I've done this in tan and white, and it has a high impact as well, but different. It's more nuanced. It's more nebulous. This is like a real over the top. And I understand your,
In my view, you can have more contrast than tan and white. And we'll just say like the neighboring building is dark brown and white, right? So there's room.
I'd love to give you a range of options.
Okay.
4 or 5, 3 or 4, if that is suitable for you.
Okay, so thank you. So for the board, do you want this to come back to everybody, or I'm okay with subcommittee? I think
Well, are
we're
we,
in the
are we in agreement then that, the overall concept's okay, just the combination of colors is?
No, I'm not. I just don't think there should be a mural in the street-facing facade.
Even in a different color?
Yeah, in any color. I think we're setting a precedent that if this were carried throughout the street, and if this came to us as a new building, we certainly wouldn't look for a mural in the facade.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I actually
So I
don't
just
agree
don't
with that, because we have murals on side facades, but like Printers Inc. and Antonio's Nut House, I mean, that's like, to me, that's as prominent as California Avenue. I mean, those are large facades facing a major intersection. So, and we have lots of art all over, and sculpture all up and down the street. So I can support it on the front facade.
I could go either way. I think.
Have to go one way or the other.
Yeah. Okay.
I think if the colors were perhaps a little bit more muted, I think I could be okay with it on the front facade.
Maybe just to clarify,
Scott,
are we talking about the signage being kind of detached from the wall plane there onto the awning still, or we're just talking about just the changes in colors on the mural, or those, I don't know if the...
Well, I mean, it's twofold. Peter doesn't like the whole mural, so that's one thing. I think right now, when it's the black sign with the white lettering, with the black and white mural, to me, it's one big sign. And so I would be much more amenable if you wanted to keep the black and white sign and then use a color on the mural, or a couple of white and something else, or whatever, 2 colors that are more amenable to the building, or something that's toned down. Then also the distinction between the actual lit sign and the mural become much more obvious. So, I mean, I'm willing to, have that done at the subcommittee level.
So, Chair, if I may, I'm looking at the subcommittee schedule, and one of your board members who's not present today is going to be on that subcommittee, and I just wonder if it makes sense to, we have no idea where that particular individual is with respect to the application. It might just be better for this to come back to the board. I mean,
That was my take on it, especially since the board sort of has a range. It seems like the board has a range of opinions, and it's not firmly clear on which direction. It's not completely set in stone which direction it should go. And so I'm thinking that, I think it should come back to the board too. Any motions?
Okay. And I'm sorry, I feel like we need to give the applicant a little bit more direction. We have heard different ideas about whether the sign itself is attached to the facade or attached to the awning. I think that's a design change that, if that's the direction we're going, I think we need to communicate that.
So I would say, I think we're looking for more separation between art and sign, right?
Right, now whether you do that physically or by color, I think that's up to the
designer, right? I think we're a little greater distinction there, less contrast, possibly wrapping something around a corner or relocation to the side.
Yeah, now the other alternative is, as you said, is to use the mural that it wraps around one of the corners, and then on the other side of the front facade, you just have a separate signage. Something like that. So you still get the effect of the mural, but if it wraps the corner, it begins to feel more like a mural than it does a sign to begin with. And it may also tone it down somewhat. So, I mean, they're very flexible. Like I said, you know, that's up to you as far as how you want to do it. This is awfully overpowering.
Yeah.
So what do you want to just bring it back to a date certain or uncertain or?
No, I think if we were going to bring it back to a date certain, which seems reasonable, November 2nd would be the appropriate date.
Okay. I move that we bring this project back to a date certain of November 2nd.
Anybody seconding?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Okay, we will see you on November 2nd.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
That's, yeah. I know. That was amazing.
Yes, we just have minutes, and so I know you have to
definitely talk to them
leave.
Bring back a few different options.
Okay, so we have item number 6, which is draft architectural review board minutes for August 3rd and September 7th.
Yeah.
The ones for August 3rd were on a previous agenda, but we didn't have a quorum at that time because one of the board members was absent for that meeting. And those came previously, and I didn't have any comments for that one. Are there any comments? Okay, and then I didn't receive the ones for September 7th.
Yeah, neither did I.
So maybe if we could push that to the next meeting, right? Did you have any comments on the minutes? No. Okay, so I will make a motion that we approve the minutes for August 3rd.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Okay, and then we will put the September 7th ones up for the next meeting. We have 2 subcommittee items, 1545 Alma Street and 567 Maple Avenue. And for subcommittee members, you could take, you're allowed to take a lunch, you may take a lunch break now or after or in between the subcommittee items. Okay?
Or do you want to stay?
So